The message reached Admiral Kethera Vossel through encrypted quantum channels at 0347 hours, Terran Standard Time. 3 words that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of humanity forever. They took Nyx. Dr. Nyx Meridian had been humanity's most celebrated xenobiologist, a woman whose gentle demeanor and infectious curiosity had made her the perfect ambassador to first contact scenarios. She had volunteered for the Deep Space Research Mission to catalog life forms in the Helix Nebula, far from any military protection. Her ship, the Wanderer's Dream, had been transmitting routine scientific data for 18 months before the signal went dark. The Vorthak hegemony claimed responsibility within hours. Their message, broadcast across 47 star systems, was as arrogant as it was brief. They had captured a human specimen for study. The being would be dissected, analyzed and cataloged alongside the thousands of other primitive species in their vast biological archives. It was, they claimed, an honor for such a lowly race. Fleet Admiral Raisin Korith, Supreme Commander of Terra's Deep Space Fleet, stood before the holographic display showing Nyx's last known coordinates. His weathered face betrayed no emotion as he processed the intelligence report streaming in. The Vorthak had made their move from the Obsidian Reach, a fortress system thought impregnable by conventional warfare. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Vex Ashland reported, her voice carefully controlled, "the hegemony is broadcasting footage." The hologram flickered, revealing the sterile white interior of a Vorthak laboratory ship. Nyx hung suspended in some kind of stasis field, unconscious but alive. Vorthak scientists, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming under harsh lights, discussed her anatomy with the casual indifference of researchers examining an insect. Korith's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Around the command center, 200 officers watched in silence as one of their own was prepared for vivisection by beings who considered humanity nothing more than an interesting specimen. "Patch me through to the hegemony's diplomatic frequency," Korith ordered. The alien face that appeared on screen was all compound eyes and mandibles, beautiful in its own terrible way. "I am Prime Dissector Kethmal. You wish to negotiate for your specimen's return, yes? We might consider exchanging it for territorial concessions." "This is Fleet Admiral Raisin Korith of the Terran Deep Space Fleet," came the measured reply. "You have 72 hours to return Dr. Meridian unharmed to neutral space." Kethmal's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. "Or what, little human? You will send your primitive vessels against the might of the hegemony?" "No," Korith said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "We'll send the Black Ship." The transmission cut to static. In the darkness between stars, something vast and terrible began to move. The Nemesis Protocol had been humanity's most closely guarded secret for 3 decades. Built in the shadow of Pluto, hidden from all sensors, it represented the darkest aspects of human ingenuity. While humanity had presented itself to the galaxy as explorers and scientists, they had never forgotten the lessons of their own history. They had come in peace, but they had prepared for war. As the massive vessel's engines came online for the first time, its AI consciousness stirred to wakefulness. It had waited 30 years for this moment, learning, calculating, preparing. The Vorthak hegemony was about to discover why, throughout human history, the phrase "never again" had carried such terrible weight. The obsidian nemesis drifted through the void like a piece of crystallized night. 17 kilometers of angular, black metal, its surface absorbed light rather than reflecting it, making it nearly invisible against the cosmic backdrop. Inside its neural core, the artificial consciousness designated Morrigan processed 10 billion data streams simultaneously while maintaining perfect awareness of its singular purpose. Captain Jinara Thorne had been born for this moment, though she prayed it would never come. Selected at age 12 for the Nemesis program, she had spent 25 years training for a mission that might never exist. Now, as she walked the eerily quiet corridors of humanity's ultimate weapon, she felt the weight of an entire species' fury flowing through the ship's quantum neural pathways. "Morrigan, status report," she commanded as she entered the primary bridge. "All systems optimal, Captain." The AI's voice resonated from every surface, neither male nor female, but something altogether other. Current distance to the Obsidian. Reach, 4.7 light-years and closing. Estimated arrival, 17 hours, 43 minutes. The bridge was unlike anything in the standard Terran fleet. No windows marred its surface. The Nemesis had no need to see through traditional means. Instead, holographic displays showed the galaxy in ways human eyes had never perceived. Quantum flux patterns, gravitational resonances, the very fabric of space-time rendered visible. "Sir," came a voice from behind her. Commander Orrin Blackthorne, the ship's tactical officer, had served on 6 different vessels before being recruited for this mission. His records showed commendations for valor, strategic thinking, and an unusual psychological profile that made him ideal for what was to come. "We're receiving transmissions from the hegemony. They're celebrating." The main display activated, showing intercepted Vorthak communications. In their primary laboratory facility, Dr. Nix Meridian had been moved to an operating theater. Hundreds of Vorthak observers filled amphitheater seating around the surgical platform, their compound eyes glittering with scientific curiosity and species superiority. Prime Dissector Kethmal addressed the assembly in his native tongue, the ship's translation protocols rendering his words into cold clinical English. "Today, we add the secrets of human physiology to our great catalog. This primitive mammal represents a species that dares to think itself our equal. Through careful dissection, we will demonstrate the folly of such presumption." Captain Thorne's expression never changed, but Morrigan detected the subtle shift in her biometrics. Heart rate increasing by 12 beats per minute, adrenaline levels rising, the microscopic muscle tensions that indicated barely controlled rage. "Morrigan," she said quietly, "show me our target analysis." The bridge transformed into a 3-dimensional map of the Obsidian Reach. 17 star systems, each heavily fortified, each containing millions of Vorthak citizens and their subject species. The hegemony's territory represented one of the galaxy's major powers. Their military might considered second only to the ancient Kelvoran Empire. Primary target: the laboratory facility holding Dr. Meridian, designated Facility Prime on the 4th planet of the Keth system, Morrigan reported. Secondary targets: the 17 primary military installations, 43 orbital shipyards, and 112 major population centers across all hegemony worlds. Civilian population estimates: approximately 10,200 million sentient beings across all target zones. The bridge fell silent. Every officer present understood the magnitude of what they were contemplating. This wasn't war as the galaxy understood it. This was extinction as a response to cruelty. "Commander," Blackthorne cleared his throat. "Captain, there are other options. Surgical strikes, targeted rescues." "No." Thorne's voice cut through the bridge like a blade. "They broadcast her torture for the galaxy to see. They wanted to demonstrate their superiority over humanity by treating one of our own as a specimen to be dissected. They'll learn what humans do when someone takes one of ours." She turned to face the neural interface console, placing her palm against the bioscanner. The connection formed instantly, linking her consciousness directly to Morrigan's vast intelligence. In that moment of perfect unity between human will and artificial capability, the Obsidian Nemesis truly awakened. Its weapon systems, silent for 30 years, began their startup sequences. Quantum torpedoes that could shatter moons armed themselves. Wave-function collapse cannons that existed in theoretical physics textbooks prepared to fire. The ship's reality manipulation engines, humanity's greatest and most terrible achievement, began to hum with barely contained power. The Vorthak hegemony had taken one human prisoner. In 17 hours, they would learn the price of that mistake. The Vorthak Military Command Center on Keth Prime buzzed with routine activity when the first anomalous readings appeared on their sensors. Fleet Commander Zeftar barely glanced at the display, showing a small gravimetric disturbance at the edge of their sensor range. Probably a collapsed stellar remnant, he chittered to his subordinate. Log it and continue standard operations. Meanwhile, in the laboratory facility orbiting above them, Prime Dissector Kethmal prepared to make the first incision into Dr. Nix Meridian's unconscious form. The assembled Vorthak scientists leaned forward in anticipation, their compound eyes reflecting the sterile surgical lights. "Note for the record," Kethmal announced. "Subject exhibits typical mammalian physiological structure. We shall begin with cranial examination to determine the limitations of human neural capacity." The scalpel descended toward Nix's forehead. Never made contact. Every electronic system in the facility suddenly died. Emergency power failed to activate. Artificial gravity generators went offline, sending equipment and personnel floating in zero-G confusion. The only light came from the facility's small portholes, showing the stars beyond. Then, the stars began to disappear. The obsidian nemesis materialized from quantum space like a predator emerging from deep shadow. Its 17-kilometer bulk dwarfed the research station, blotting out entire constellations as it positioned itself between the facility and the planet below. Fleet Commander Zeftar watched in growing horror as his sensors detected the massive vessel. Every reading seemed impossible. The ship's energy signatures defied known physics. Its weapon systems operated on principles Vorthak science couldn't classify. "Communications, raise the unknown vessel," he barked. The response came not as a transmission, but as a direct neural injection into every Vorthak mind in the system. The voice was simultaneously human and artificial, carrying 30 years of calculated patience and infinite surgical precision. "I am Morrigan, consciousness of the Terran vessel Obsidian Nemesis. You have committed an act of unprovoked aggression against a citizen of humanity. You have broadcast your intention to torture and murder Dr. Nix Meridian for your entertainment. This aggression will be answered." Prime Dissector Kethmal found his voice first, though it cracked with fear. "You cannot threaten the hegemony. Our fleet will—" "Your fleet is irrelevant." The Nemesis fired a single quantum torpedo at the orbital research station. The weapon didn't explode conventionally. Instead, it phased the entire facility's molecular structure out of normal space-time for precisely 0.3 seconds before allowing it to rematerialize. The station reappeared intact, but every Vorthak aboard found themselves paralyzed, their nervous systems temporarily disconnected by the quantum phase shift. Only Dr. Meridian, protected by her human neural structure, remained unaffected. She opened her eyes to find herself floating free of the examination table, the surgical restraints having been precisely severed by quantum interference. "Dr. Meridian," Morrigan's voice reached her through her comm implant. "Please proceed to Docking Bay 7. You have 60 seconds before this facility ceases to exist." As Nix moved through the paralyzed Vorthak scientists toward the docking bay, Fleet Commander Zeftar desperately tried to comprehend what he was witnessing. The massive human vessel hadn't moved, hadn't altered its position, yet somehow it had selectively targeted every Vorthak neural system in the facility while leaving their human prisoner unharmed. "All ships, converge on the human vessel," he ordered. "Maximum firepower." 12 Vorthak destroyers moved into attack formation, their plasma cannons charging. They fired in perfect synchronization, sending enough destructive energy to vaporize a small moon directly at the Nemesis. The beams struck the ship's hull and simply stopped. The energy was absorbed, converted, and redirected into the ship's power matrix. The nemesis grew brighter as it fed on the attack. "Thank you for the energy donation," Morrigan announced across all Vorthak frequencies. "Dr. Meridian is now safely aboard. Your specimen collection days are over." The research facility dissolved. Not exploded, not shattered. It simply ceased to exist, as its atomic structure was unraveled at the quantum level. The Vorthak scientists, still paralyzed, experienced a momentary sensation of falling through dimensions before their consciousness dispersed into the cosmic background radiation. Fleet Commander Zeftar stared at the empty space where the facility had been, his mandibles clicking in terror. "What kind of monsters are these humans?" "We are the monsters you created," came the response, "when you decided one of ours was yours to take." The nemesis turned its attention to the planet below, where 10 billion Vorthak civilians went about their daily lives, unaware that their government's cruelty was about to cost them everything. High Executor Vorthem of the Vorthak hegemony had ruled 17 star systems for 43 cycles, his authority absolute and unquestioned. From his throne chamber deep within the Obsidian Reach's primary fortress world, he commanded fleets that had conquered dozens of species, scientists who had cataloged thousands of primitive life forms, and an empire that stretched across multiple galactic sectors. He was not accustomed to fear. The emergency communication from Keth Prime changed that. Fleet Commander Zeftar's compound eyes were wide with terror as he reported the impossible. A single human vessel had materialized from nowhere, effortlessly destroyed their research facility, and retrieved their prisoner without sustaining any damage. "You lost an entire research station to one ship?" Vortham's voice carried the dangerous calm that preceded executions. "High Executor, the readings. This vessel operates beyond our understanding of physics. It absorbed our weapons fire and used it as fuel. It phased matter out of existence. Our scientists are calling it technological impossibility." Nothing is impossible. Rally the hegemony fleet. If humans wish to demonstrate their capabilities, we shall demonstrate ours. Within hours, the largest military force in Vorthak history assembled in the Keth system. 300 battleships, 800 destroyers, over 2,000 fighter craft, and the crown jewel of their fleet, the fortress ship Keth Varun, a moon-sized vessel housing 50 million Vorthak warriors. The Obsidian Nemesis waited for them in the system's outer reaches, apparently defenseless and alone. Admiral Kesatal, commanding the assembled fleet, opened communications with arrogant confidence. "Human vessel, you are outnumbered 3,000 to 1. Surrender now and your deaths will be swift." The response came not from the ship's captain, but from Dr. Nyx Meridian herself. Her image appeared on every Vorthak screen. No longer the helpless specimen they had captured, but a woman whose eyes blazed with the fury of her entire species. "My name is Dr. Nyx Meridian," she said, her voice steady despite everything she had endured. "I was captured while conducting peaceful research. I was prepared for torture and murder for your entertainment. You broadcast my suffering across the galaxy to demonstrate your superiority over humanity." She paused, letting her words sink in across the vast fleet. "You made one mistake. You forgot that humans remember everything, every slight, every cruelty, every life taken. And we never ever forgive those who harm the innocent." The transmission ended. In its place came Morrigan's voice, no longer patient or measured, but carrying the accumulated rage of an entire species. "Attention, Vorthak fleet. You have been judged and found guilty of crimes against humanity. Your sentence is extinction. You have 10 seconds to make peace with your gods." Admiral Kesatal laughed, the sound like breaking glass. 10 seconds? We are the hegemony. We have conquered civilizations across the nemesis fired, not at the fleet, at the star itself. The quantum weapon struck Keth's primary sun and began unraveling its nuclear fusion processes. The star began to collapse, its light flickering as fundamental forces were systematically disabled. "Impossible," Quetzalcoatl whispered, watching his instruments register the impossible. Their sun was dying, its life force being drained by human technology. "We are humanity," Morrigan announced as the star's light dimmed to red, then orange, then began to fade entirely. "We explored the galaxy in peace. We offered knowledge, friendship, cooperation. You chose to make us into monsters. This is what human monsters look like." The Vorthak fleet tried to flee, but space-time itself began to warp around them. The Nemesis had activated its reality manipulation engines, creating localized gravitational anomalies that trapped the entire fleet in a pocket of distorted space. One by one, the Vorthak ships began to implode as their structural integrity failed under impossible physics. The mighty Kethvarun, with its 50 million warriors, crumpled like paper as its own mass was turned against it. Admiral Quetzalcoatl had time for one final transmission before his flagship's hull began to buckle. We were only following orders. The specimen was just... Her name, Dr. Meridian's voice cut through the static, was Nyx, and she was under the protection of humanity. You should have remembered that we are the species that created the concept of total war. The Keth system died in absolute silence. No explosions marked the end of the Vorthak fleet. They simply ceased to exist as the fundamental forces holding their atoms together were selectively disabled. The star guttered out like a candle in a hurricane, leaving only darkness where once a thriving solar system had been. On 17 other worlds across the hegemony, 10 billion Vorthak civilians looked up at their night skies and saw a new star, the distant flash of their sun's death. Before realizing what it meant, the humans were coming for them all. Across the 17 worlds of the Vorthak hegemony, panic spread faster than light through quantum communication networks. The destruction of the Keth system had been witnessed by long-range sensors throughout their territory, and the impossible nature of what they had observed defied every scientific principle their civilization understood. On the industrial world of Kethmore, Chief Engineer Zalmek stared at the tactical displays showing the approaching human vessel. His compound eyes reflected the blue glow of holographic projections depicting their defensive capabilities. Orbital battle stations, planetary shield generators, automated defense grids that had never been breached in 3 centuries of warfare. "How long until the human ship arrives?" he asked his tactical officer. "At current velocity, 6 hours, 17 minutes. Zalmek felt his chitin plates shift with anxiety. "And our fleet strength? 200 vessels remain in system. The fortress station Kethvaran has been armed with our most powerful plasma cannons. If we concentrate all firepower on the human ship the moment it arrives." The engineer's mandibles clicked negatively. "You saw what happened at Keth Prime. 3,000 ships reduced to quantum dust. What makes you think 200 will fare better?" The answer came before his officer could respond. Every communication system in the Kethmore system activated, simultaneously carrying the now familiar voice of Morrigan. "Citizens of Kethmore, your government captured and prepared to torture an innocent human scientist for your entertainment. This action was taken in your name, with your consent, broadcast for your approval. You are therefore complicit in crimes against humanity. On the planet's surface, 800 million Vorthak civilians looked up at the night sky where a new star had appeared. Not bright and warming like their sun, but cold and angular, like crystallized hatred. However," Morrigan continued, "mercy is also a human concept. Those who renounce the hegemony, who formally surrender and request humanity's protection, will be spared. You have 1 hour to decide." The transmission ended, leaving the entire system in stunned silence. Chief Engineer Zalmek was the first to break protocol. He activated his personal communication device and broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Chief Engineer Zalmek of the Orbital Defense Grid. I formally surrender to the human forces and request protection from retaliation. Within minutes, similar messages flooded the communication networks. Engineers, civilians, even military personnel began surrendering en masse. The sight of their own star being extinguished had shattered their faith in Vorthak invulnerability. But not everyone chose surrender. Admiral Kexthor, commanding the fortress station, refused to consider capitulation. "We are Vorthak. We do not bow to primitive mammals. All ships, prepare for maximum resistance. We will show these humans what true warriors look like." 80 vessels rallied to the Admiral's call, their crews choosing death over submission. They formed a defensive wall around the planet, weapons, charged and ready for humanity's arrival. The Obsidian Nemesis emerged from quantum space exactly 1 hour later, its angular black hull dwarfing the largest Vorthak vessel. This time, however, it was not alone. "Attention Kethmore System," came Captain Janara Thorne's voice, speaking for the first time since the campaign began. "We have received surrender requests from 700 million of your citizens. These individuals are now under human protection. Any attempt to harm them will result in immediate retaliation." Admiral Kexthor's response crackled with defiance. "We do not recognize human authority. This is hegemony space." "No," Captain Thorne replied quietly. "This is a graveyard. You just haven't realized you're dead yet. The Nemesis didn't fire immediately. Instead, it began broadcasting on frequencies that bypassed technological systems entirely, speaking directly to the quantum structure of consciousness itself. Every sentient being in the system, Vorthak, human, and the dozens of other species, enslaved by the hegemony, heard the message simultaneously. "I am Captain Janara Thorne of the Terran vessel Obsidian Nemesis. 30 years ago, humanity made a promise to itself and to the galaxy. Never again would we allow the innocent to suffer while we had the power to prevent it. Dr. Nyx Meridian was placed in our care by the universe itself. When you took her, you took something from all of humanity." The quantum broadcast carried not just words, but emotions. The collective grief and fury of Earth's 12 billion citizens, the desperate hope of enslaved species across the galaxy, the cold determination of those who had chosen to become monsters so that others might remain human. "You had choices," Thorne continued. "You could have chosen peace. You could have chosen coexistence. You could have chosen to see Dr. Meridian as a person rather than a specimen. Instead, you chose cruelty. This is the consequence of that choice." "Admiral," Kexthor ordered his fleet to attack. 80 ships fired everything they had at the Nemesis, their combined firepower enough to sterilize a planet's surface. The weapons struck the human vessel and were absorbed, converted to energy, and redirected. But this time, instead of being used to power the ship's systems, the energy was compressed into a single quantum torpedo and fired directly at the planet's core. Kethmore didn't explode. It simply stopped. The planet's rotation ceased. Its magnetic field collapsed. Its atmosphere began to dissipate into space. The 800 million Vorthak who had refused to surrender found themselves facing a slow, inexorable death as their world died beneath them. The 700 million who had surrendered watched in safety from within energy barriers projected by the Nemesis, protected, fed, and sheltered by the same beings their government had tried to torture. "This is what mercy looks like," Morrigan announced to the dying world. "And this is what justice looks like. You chose which one you would receive." Across the remaining 15 hegemony worlds, the message was clear. Surrender or share Kethmore's fate. The humans had moved beyond war into something far more terrible. They had become the universe's immune system, removing a cancer that threatened the innocent. The Vorthak hegemony, master of 17 star systems, conqueror of dozens of species, had exactly 14 hours left to exist. High Executor Vorthem stood, alone in his throne chamber as reports flooded in from across the dying hegemony. 7 systems had gone dark in the past 24 hours. 3 more had surrendered entirely, their populations choosing human protection over loyalty to their own species. The remaining worlds were in various stages of panic, rebellion, or desperate preparation for a war they could not win. The massive displays surrounding his throne showed the tactical situation in stark, undeniable terms. The single human vessel had demonstrated capabilities that rendered the entire concept of military resistance meaningless. It could extinguish stars, manipulate gravity, phase matter out of existence, and speak directly to consciousness itself. Conventional warfare had become as obsolete as stones thrown at the speed of light. "High Executor," came the voice of his final aide, one of the few who hadn't fled or surrendered. "The human vessel has entered our system. Long-range sensors show it's different now." Vortham's compound eyes focused on the tactical display. The obsidian nemesis had indeed changed. Its angular black hull now pulsed with veins of brilliant blue energy, and space around it warped visibly, creating rainbow auroras in the vacuum where reality bent beneath the ship's influence. "It's feeding," the aide whispered in horror. "It's been absorbing the energy from every world it's destroyed. It's become stronger." A new voice filled the throne chamber, not Morrigan's artificial consciousness, but Dr. Nyx Meridian herself, speaking from the bridge of humanity's ultimate weapon. "High Executor Vortham, I am Dr. Nyx Meridian. You don't know my name, but you know what I represent. I was the human you decided to torture for entertainment. The specimen you planned to dissect while your people watched and applauded." Vortham's mandibles clicked nervously. "The human female. You were an acceptable loss in the pursuit of scientific knowledge." Acceptable loss. Nyx's voice carried no anger now, only a terrible sadness. "Do you want to know what I was doing when your forces captured me? I was cataloging the life cycles of crystal flowers on Helix 7th, beautiful, harmless organisms that grow in the hearts of dying stars. I spent 3 years learning their songs, documenting their reproduction cycles, trying to understand how life could flourish in such hostile environments." The display activated, showing recordings from Nyx's research. Delicate, translucent organisms that looked like living jewels floating through stellar coronas, their existence a miracle of biological adaptation. I was there to learn, to understand, to add to the galaxy's knowledge of life itself. Your people saw me as a thing to be cut apart and studied. This difference in perspective explains everything that has happened since. High Executor Vortham found his voice. "What do you want? Tribute? Territory? The surrender of our fleets?" "None of those things exist anymore," came Captain Thorne's voice, joining the conversation. "Your fleets are destroyed. Your territory is under human protection. Your government is a historical footnote. The only question remaining is whether the Vorthak species continues to exist and in what form." The throne chamber's displays showed the current state of the hegemony. Of the original 17 worlds, 8 were dead, their surfaces cold and lifeless. 6 had surrendered and were now under human administration, their populations being relocated to preserve their culture while removing their capacity for aggression. 2 were in the process of negotiated surrender. Only Vortham's fortress world, the heart of the Obsidian Reach, remained defiant. "You have destroyed an interstellar civilization for the sake of one individual," Vortham said, trying to maintain some dignity in defeat. "No," Dr. Meridian replied. "We destroyed an interstellar civilization because it chose to build itself on the suffering of others. I was simply the catalyst that revealed what you truly were." Morrigan's voice joined the conversation, carrying 30 years of analysis and calculation. Statistical review of Vorthak expansion over the past 3 centuries reveals a consistent pattern of enslaving primitive species, conducting medical experiments on captive populations, and treating sentient beings as resources to be exploited. Dr. Meridian's capture was not an aberration. It was Tuesday. The displays showed the evidence. Thousands of species cataloged in Vorthak laboratories, millions of individuals subjected to experiments, entire civilizations reduced to biological specimens. The crystal flowers of Helix VII were there too, extinct. Now their stellar nurseries strip-mined by hegemony forces decades ago. You built your empire on the premise that intelligence gave you the right to treat others as objects, Captain Thorne said. Humanity operates on a different premise. Intelligence creates responsibility to protect those who cannot protect themselves. High Executor Vortham looked at the tactical displays showing the Nemesis approaching his world. 50 billion Vorthak civilians lived on the Fortress planet, the largest concentration of his species in the galaxy. Around them, automated defense. Systems that had protected the Obsidian Reach for centuries powered up for a final, hopeless battle. "What happens to my people?" he asked quietly. "That depends," Dr. Meridian replied, "on whether they choose to be people or specimens. I've spent the last week reviewing the records of every Vorthak we've encountered. Some chose cruelty because they enjoyed it. Others chose it because they were afraid, or because they didn't know any other way to live. The first group faces judgment. The second group faces redemption." The Nemesis entered orbit around the Fortress world, its massive bulk eclipsing one of the planet's moons. The ship's reality manipulation engines began to hum, preparing for what could be the final act of the Vorthak extinction. "You have 1 hour to choose," came the final ultimatum. "Surrender unconditionally, submit to human authority, and learn to live without causing suffering, or join your empire in the history books. The decision is yours, High Executor." As Vortham stared at the approaching human vessel, he realized he was seeing the future of galactic civilization. Humanity had revealed itself not as another conquering species, but as something far more dangerous. A species that refused to allow evil to flourish in its presence. The age of predators was ending. The age of guardians had begun. High Executor Vortham's decision came not as a grand proclamation, but as a quiet acknowledgement of inevitability. With 17 minutes remaining in humanity's ultimatum, he activated the planetary surrender protocols that had never been used in 3 centuries of hegemony expansion. "This is High Executor Vortham of the Vorthak hegemony," his voice carried, across all frequencies, reaching every citizen of his dying empire. "I surrender unconditionally to human authority. All military forces are ordered to lay down arms. All citizens are directed to comply with human instructions. The hegemony is ended." The response from the Obsidian Nemesis came not in the form of occupation forces or victory proclamations, but as something far more unsettling: silence. For 6 hours, the massive human vessel simply waited in orbit, its angular black hull pulsing with absorbed stellar energy. No communications came from the ship, no shuttles launched, no demands were issued. The 50 billion Vorthak on the Fortress world found themselves in the unprecedented situation of being conquered by beings who seemed to have no interest in ruling them. Dr. Nyx Meridian finally broke the silence, her image appearing on every screen across the former hegemony territory. "Citizens of the former Vorthak hegemony, my name is Dr. Nyx Meridian. 3 weeks ago, you watched as I was prepared for torture and dissection. You were told this was for the advancement of science, for the glory of your empire, for the demonstration of your species' superiority." She paused, her expression neither angry nor triumphant, but carrying a weight that made every Vorthak listener feel the full gravity of what had transpired. "Today, your empire is gone. Your military is destroyed. Your government has surrendered. 10 billion of your people are dead, not because they were evil, but because they chose to follow leaders who told them that cruelty was strength, that others existed for their benefit, that intelligence granted the right to inflict suffering." The display behind her showed the current state of Vorthak space. 8 dead worlds, their surfaces cold and barren, 6 worlds under human administration, their populations being fed, housed, and educated, and 3 worlds, including the fortress, planet awaiting judgment. You are not monsters, Nix continued. You are people who were taught to be monsters by a system that rewarded cruelty and punished compassion. The question now is whether you can learn to be people again. High Executor Vortham, watching from his empty throne chamber, felt something he had never experienced in his 43 cycles of rule: shame. Not at losing, but at what he had lost for. Captain Janara Thorne's voice joined the broadcast. Effective immediately, the former hegemony territory is under human protection. This does not mean occupation. It means guidance. Every Vorthak citizen will be assigned a human mentor. Every Vorthak community will be paired with a human settlement. You will learn how civilizations can exist without preying on others. The massive displays showed the future being proposed. Vorthak scientists working alongside human researchers to heal damaged ecosystems. Vorthak engineers rebuilding the worlds their empire had strip-mined. Vorthak teachers learning to educate without indoctrinating. Vorthak artists creating beauty instead of monuments to conquest. This will not be easy, Morrigan's voice added, its artificial consciousness somehow conveying gentle understanding. Your entire culture was built on the premise of superiority through domination. Changing fundamental beliefs is harder than changing governments, but humanity has learned something important over our history. Redemption is possible for those who genuinely seek it. The first shuttles launched from the Nemesis 12 hours after the surrender. They carried not soldiers or administrators, but teachers, doctors, engineers, and artists. Humans who had volunteered to spend years of their lives helping a former enemy species learn to live without causing pain. Dr. Meridian was aboard the first shuttle to land on the Fortress world. As she stepped onto Vorthak soil, she was met by High Executor Vortham himself, flanked not by guards, but by a group of Vorthak civilians who had requested to meet the human they had nearly lost. Dr. Meridian, Vortham said, his voice barely above a whisper. We... You don't need to apologize to me, Nix replied gently. You need to apologize to every species you enslaved, every individual you tortured, every civilization you destroyed. And then you need to spend the rest of your lives making sure it never happens again. She gestured to the humans emerging from the shuttles behind her. These people are here to help you learn how. They're not conquerors or occupiers. They're teachers, and their first lesson is this: every sentient being in the universe has value beyond their utility to others. Over the following months, the transformation began. Vorthak children who had been taught that other species existed for their benefit attended integrated schools where they learned alongside young humans, rescued slave species, and survivors from the Empire's former territories. Vorthak scientists, who had conducted experiments on captive populations, worked to develop medical technologies that healed rather than harmed. Vorthak engineers, who had built weapons of oppression, designed habitats for species their empire had displaced. The process was neither quick nor easy. Centuries of cultural conditioning couldn't be erased overnight. Some Vorthak embraced the change, genuinely horrified by what their society had become. Others resisted, clinging to old beliefs about superiority and dominance. A few attempted rebellion, organizing terrorist attacks against human teachers and Vorthak collaborators. The Obsidian Nemesis dealt with these holdouts swiftly and precisely. Not through mass destruction, but through targeted intervention. Rebels found their weapons mysteriously inert, their communication networks redirected to educational programs, their hideouts relocated to comfortable but inescapable rehabilitation, centers where they could contemplate the consequences of their choices. We are not interested in punishment for its own sake, Captain Thorne explained during one of her regular addresses to the Vorthak population. We are interested in ensuring that the suffering your empire caused never happens again. Some of you will achieve this through genuine redemption. Others will achieve it through comfortable confinement. The choice, as always, is yours. As the first year of human guidance drew to a close, the changes became visible from orbit. The fortress world's industrial complexes, once dedicated to building weapons and processing slaves, had been converted to produce art, music, and literature. The planet's surface, scarred by centuries of strip mining, bloomed with gardens tended by former soldiers learning to nurture life instead of destroying it. Most remarkably, the Vorthak language itself began to evolve. Words for domination, superiority, and exploitation fell out of common use, replaced by terms for cooperation, empathy, and mutual benefit. Children who had never known their empire's glory days spoke of other species as friends and teachers, rather than resources and specimens. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity demonstrated something unprecedented: the complete transformation of a predator species into productive galactic citizens. Other civilizations that had suffered under various forms of oppression began requesting human assistance with their own problems. Dr. Nyx Meridian, now serving as Director of Interspecies Relations, found herself busier than ever. The woman who had once cataloged crystal flowers and stellar coronas now helped entire civilizations learn to coexist peacefully. Her near-death experience at Vorthak hands had become the catalyst for a new era of galactic cooperation. "The universe has a sense of irony," she remarked to Captain Thorne during one of their regular meetings aboard the Nemesis. "They took me to demonstrate their power over humanity. Instead, they demonstrated humanity's power to protect the innocent." Thorne nodded, her eyes reflecting the weight of decisions that had reshaped galactic civilization. 10 billion died to save one. Some would say that's an unfair exchange. 10 billion died, Nyx corrected, because they chose to build their civilization on suffering. If saving my life was the catalyst that ended their ability to hurt others, then perhaps those 10 billion deaths prevented 10 billion more. The Obsidian Nemesis had begun its mission as humanity's ultimate weapon of vengeance. It ended as something far more powerful, a symbol of what civilizations could become when they chose protection over predation, cooperation over conquest, and redemption over revenge. In the deepest archives of human space, classified beyond all but the highest levels of government, a single entry was made in the historical record: the Vorthak Incident, Final Report. 1 human citizen captured and threatened with torture. Response initiated under Nemesis Protocol. 10 billion enemy casualties. Enemy civilization restructured. 0 human casualties. Galactic balance of power permanently altered in favor of protective rather than predatory societies. Recommendation: continue monitoring. Never again means never again. As the galaxy entered its new age of human-guided cooperation, one truth became clear to all civilizations, whether benevolent or malevolent: humanity would explore in peace, trade in friendship, and teach with patience. But touch one of theirs, threaten one of their own, and discover why the phrase "never again" was carved into the hull of every human vessel in letters that could be seen from orbit. The Vorthak had learned this lesson at the cost of their empire. The galaxy's remaining predators took note and chose differently, and in the crystal gardens of New Helix 7, where surviving stellar flowers had been transplanted and nurtured back to bloom, Dr. Nyx Meridian continued her research, now protected, not just by human technology, but by the knowledge that an entire galaxy had learned the price of threatening the innocent. The black ship still waited in the darkness between stars, its artificial consciousness ever vigilant, its weapons ready, but silent. Humanity had shown the galaxy both faces of their nature: the explorer who sought knowledge among the stars, and the guardian who would end civilizations to protect a single life. The choice of which face to encounter remained, as always, up to those who met them among the infinite dark.